Basically, this was called the International Lunar Resources Exploration Concept. Okay, as this was basically a part of the original Bush's plan to return. And when this was opting for what was called a lunar surface rendezvous, in which basically the craft doesn't have enough fuel to get back to the Earth, so you have to refuel on the Moon. So this is literally a moon or bust option. But what I find interesting about this is this was going to be using one of the proposals. Here's actually a photograph of it, or rather an artist's rendition of it, I should say, on the lunar surface. They have like an Apollo-style capsule here, which is connected to all these tanks and engines and stuff. And they were considering many different launch vehicles, including the Soviet Buran was one of the options. But this is one of the launch vehicles that was considered was the Shuttle C. Essentially, you got the same booster rockets, you got the same external tank, and only instead of the orbiter, basically you take off the orbiter and you put on this cargo mount, which basically has the shuttle's main engines, and inside is the actual payload. Now, this here is the actual spacecraft, and down here is the trans stage, which is supposed to carry them to the moon. And this was proposed back in the 90s when it was George Bush Sr.'s idea of returning to the moon. There was another idea which was called Lunar Early Access, which was
that's the lander, is it?
This is a more straightforward idea. They have the same space shuttle as always, only this time they have an Apollo-style capsule, these landing leg things here. That's launched from the space shuttle's cargo bay. The actual trans stage will be launched by a separate rocket. They're proposing either an Ariane 5 or a Titan. They still had the Titan rockets back in those days. And the idea was that these two would dock. And here's the thing, this one wouldn't actually enter lunar orbit. It would literally be fired straight at the moon and has to make a hard landing, I should say, by firing its engines before it would essentially crash into the lunar surface. This is seriously what they were proposing back in those days. But what's important to note is that these both proposed using shuttle technology. Like this one is obvious. This was proposing to put the Apollo-style capsule with the descent stage into Earth orbit. It would dock with some other vehicle, launched by another spacecraft. This one proposes, taking off the orbit, but still using the boosters and the engines, but it has essentially an unmanned cargo variant of it.
It's interesting here. I mentioned Arthur C. Clarke as a kind of joke earlier on, but if you look at some of his early science fiction, he makes a point that seems to be not lost on the people who make these designs that Jarrah's just shown us. Now, of course, Apollo wasn't like that. Apollos were all single launch missions. Everything was just bunged on the top of one rocket, the big Saturn V that Mark has described. That was sent to the moon. It came back. It was a very simple plan compared to those which Jarrah's just described and what Arthur C. Clarke described long, long ago, before anyone allegedly went into space. So NASA are essentially retconning the entire Apollo missions to try and fit it in with what we're saying. What they don't realize is they're saying these things now, which they didn't say at the time. It's like the thing you said about the radiation, Jarrah, when you had contacted Elon Musk. It's all stuff they've come out with since we've been talking. These are not contemporary things, which they should be contemporary because they should be essential design features of the missions.
There's something I'd like to push up here. This is the first page. You come down to this article here, Apollo Ektachrome film subject to recycling in a vacuum. That's just been published, which talks about the work that is being done in Canada by Rob Williams, and it's written by me and Scott Henderson. So for anybody watching this program, have a look at this website, owlis.com, Owlis Online, and you'll see the report on the vacuum testing. It's what's blown NASA apart, actually, because here are the pictures which show the control on the left and the same image taken with a film that has been taken out of the vacuum chamber. And notice how the color balance on the film is completely shot. The contrast levels are completely different. Here's another picture. It's the same image on a different roll of film. This is a normal roll of Kodak Ektachrome. This is Kodak Ektachrome after it has been subjected to 3 recyclings through a vacuum chamber.
And as Scott has pointed out, you put it in a vacuum chamber, but the vacuum it would have actually had to put up with on the moon would be even more extreme.
Exactly. The only level of vacuum that they could create here on Earth with the vacuum chamber they got, which cost several $100, was the equivalent of being in low Earth orbit.
And to clarify, the camera, the Hasselblad camera, with which this Ektachrome film was put in, was not pressurized in any way.
It wasn't pressurized, nor were the film cameras, the data acquisition cameras mounted in the Apollo command module, photographing outside through the pilot's window, that's the right-hand side, of all the activity on the moon. That's the Hexagon Spy satellite on display now, which used photographic film. This is the point. Stereo panoramic cameras had to be kept pressurized, and they were pressurized within this housing, 1 pound per square inch.
How long was the Ektachrome film actually kept inside this chamber that you had?
It was over a period, I think, of 3 days, which was trying to recreate what happened on Apollo 17, where they had 3 EVAs. So what they were to recreate was the depressurization of the lunar module.
This is very incriminating because it essentially you have proved that this kind of film is damaged by exposure to a vacuum.
There was something I wanted to ask you about, Marcus.
Yeah.
Were there any tests, these vacuum tests, done on much shorter exposures to vacuum?
I think there are further tests going on. They're still doing the tests now. And it's certainly true to say that because we see photographs of Ed White with a camera, obviously in space, well, we assume he's in space, we make that assumption. I don't recall seeing the pictures that he took with that camera. Now, it may well be that at that point they discovered that there were problems with photographic film. This is photographic film for anybody who's never seen a bit of photographic film. Photographic film is plastic-backed, emulsion-coated, light-sensitive material. One of the techniques of filming, if you want to alter the characteristics of a film, you basically pinch it with your fingers, or finger and thumb. You put pressure onto the film, and that will affect the film. We're talking a vacuum on the moon of torr of 10 to the minus 11, which is a harder vacuum than can be created anywhere here on Earth. Even the Glenn Research Center in Ohio, which is what NASA used, and if you recall Brian Cox doing his dropping the ball and the feather at the same time, he was using the Glenn Research Center vacuum chamber to do it, to show that they both landed at the same time. Of course they would. There's no air in there, nothing to stop the feather falling down. But that can only pull a pressure of 10 to the minus 7, not the same as on the moon. But when you get this sort of image from something relatively light, a relatively low vacuum, this sort of distortion of the emulsion and the recording on the film, you've got to ask the question, how do they produce such beautiful studio quality images from the lunar surface?
No worries, Marcus. Thanks for that. That's very interesting. Exclusive new information here, ladies and gentlemen, on the allowlist.com website. Andy, you there?
I am, yeah. I was just, it's fascinating, really. I just wondered where Owlis actually got its name from. I don't know if Marcus knows.
It's a Greek mythology name. Let's just say that this new article here from Phil Coots, who's written several brilliant articles on Moon Base and how they couldn't build one. It's a very interesting article about the critical thinking behind Apollo and what you should apply.
So this is on our list as well?
Yeah, this is on our list. It's only just been put up, so not everybody will have seen it. Anybody new to the Owlis website, you've got several days of reading to catch up with where we've got to.
If you get round to simulating the much shorter durations with the Gemini, I'll just look this up here. The Gemini 4 spacewalk was only 20 minutes. On Gemini 12, Aldrin got about 2.5 hours outside on his EVA. He also had a standard EVA with just under an hour, 55 minutes. I think that would be a worthwhile thing investigating. I'm not sure if this is the same camera that they use and stuff. They had a few cameras, actually. There was this one called the Pilot Observer camera. I'm actually looking at it right now. Yeah, this is what they call the Gemini Pilot Observation camera. I think that's what they called it, which they use to film, reels of film inside the cabin. I'm not sure if this camera was pressurized, but by the looks of it, it looks like a sealed box almost.
It would certainly be pressurized inside the cabin. because he isn't wearing a visor.
Just saying, I'm not sure if they're using pressurized cameras on the Gemini and stuff, but I think it would be something that you should investigate for, for cross-referencing, just to make sure and everything.
Yeah.
When it comes to the Gemini. I know Skill will probably cite that in response to these new discoveries with the film in the vacuum chamber.
Yeah.
On the subject of the lunar base, which Phil Coots writes about, I remember, people said, well, would the Apollo astronauts live long enough to see another moon landing? When the Apollo missions actually happened, there was absolutely no question of it. Some of them were saying, well, when they're going to go back, they'll probably be going back in a couple of years. Well, if you read the science fiction, like I'm an Arthur C. Clarke fan, and if you read the science fiction of that era, they predict without a doubt that within a couple of decades there would be permanent bases on the moon. Regular space travel would become as routine as air travel. Expeditions to the outer planets, all these kinds of things. And I'm sure everyone was so excited that I'm sure if they could have seen forward in time to the year 2020, they would gasp in dismay.
You look at technology, how it progressed over the years and stuff. Like back in the 60s, the only way, having a kinescope to record your favorite TV shows, that was a luxury back in those days. Then Betamax comes along. Oh wow, this is amazing and stuff. Then of course there's the format wars with VHS and everything like that. Now we've got Blu-ray, we've got streaming, we've got everything. That's just one example of how technology has just gotten better and better over the years. Somehow with the space program, this is the one technology that seems to have gone backwards.
Oh, it's really, yeah. So it's not even stayed the same. It has literally gone backwards, as Phil Coots has demonstrated. No,
Randy, he's uploaded a video of himself flying his plane because he's been accused of not being a real pilot.
He's a real pilot.
Yeah, someone filmed him, and actually they also uploaded the unedited version because the accusations went further, because they said, oh no, he could be a student pilot and the actual real pilot is the guy that's filming it, which was a bit of a silly thing, because you're letting your student be in full control of a plane whilst you're in charge of a video camera, which is not the done thing as an aviation person, I suspect. So they decided to put the unedited version, 20 minutes or whatever it was, up, that shows the whole thing of him being the actual pilot. So this is Randy, who will be discuss this in our next show. Yeah.
Let's say Phil Platt has got some more explaining to do. If Phil Platt is one of Randy's protagonists, because now Randy has issued a challenge to debate online in public with him. All his trolls have been asked to debate with him, and not one of them has accepted.
I traveled all the way to Las Vegas back in 2010, to track this plate guy down. He was actually appearing at one of James Randi's conventions. I called out Adam Savage during the Q&A session.
I remember that.
And he was like, entertainment, not science, which it flies in the face of what they were trying. They're going around saying, oh, it's busted this. I said, hey, you filmed you never slowed down the wire rig footage, and if you do that, you find it matches up nicely with the original Apollo 16 footage. And he was like, oh, I never thought of that. What we do is in science, we're an entertainment show, and our job is to demonstrate this and that, the scientific, I can forget exact words and stuff, but basically the gist of it was that, we're an entertainment show. Phil Plate, he was originally going to give me an interview with one of the representatives and stuff. It was a guy by the name of Austin Cooten. He was able to arrange a 15-minute interview between me and Plate, and he backed out after I called Savage out on his nonsense. Because he has often gone around claiming that Casing denied any space travel was possible. That's a complete lie, because in the actual interview that Plate cites, Casing specifically says that, possibly our surveyor did land on the moon. I believe that certain unmanned missions might have made it to the moon. The Russians were supposed to have done that. He makes clear that he doesn't believe that man went to the moon and stuff, but he conceives that unmanned missions to space are possible. Yeah. Unmanned missions to the moon are possible. He even cites some of the space missions in his book. He cites the biosatellite, things like the various Tetra satellites that they had, for training astronauts and stuff. This is all in his book. He clearly knows that space travel is real. And yet, Phil Blake puts words in his mouth by claiming that Casey denied any space travel was possible. He's made that claim at least 3 times. In fact, when I posted my Moonfaker series, the first episode, he actually went into the comments. I asked him, why don't you talk about Operation Dirty Trick? You might remember the Operation Northwoods thing, where they're planning on invading Cuba, using false flag attacks. One of the false flags they were considering was if the Mercury capsule exploded and John Glenn was killed, they would blame his death on Cuba. Use it as an excuse to invade Cuba.
It's obvious, like, that Phil Plait has lied, like they often lie about us. They know they're in the wrong and they don't like it, and they're using dirty tricks when they're not going quiet, which is what they are.
None of them show their faces.
Yeah.
We're showing our faces. None of them show their faces. None of them give their real names. That's cowardice of the worst sort.
The lie can only be maintained for a short time, indefinitely. You can't fool all the people all the time.